video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to build this, the best $1,000 gaming PC build for 2024 and beyond. It's a build that should provide surprisingly good 1440p performance, especially for the price, across the latest AAA titles and easier to run FPS games too. It's also a build that's going to look the part and not be too tricky to assemble. That will of course be walking you guys through the whole process from start right through to finish. Let's do this. The NZXT H6 PC case lineup offers an innovative, compact, dual-chamber mid-tower for those looking to find great aesthetics and top-tier airflow. The H6 Flow's design prioritizes GPU cooling and frees up space, while the large, expansive panoramic glass showcases the inside of your build. Available in white or black, with or without RGB fans, the H6 Flow has an option for everyone. Learn more at the review in the card section now, or buy one for yourself at the first link in the description below. In my opinion, the best place to begin with any build is with the CPU and GPU combo. Why? These are the two parts that really define the gaming performance any build is going to achieve, and maximizing how much you spend on these two components in particular is going to generally give you the best results. Now, the Radeon 7700 XT is a card that I was desperate to fit in the budget for today's build. Now, the reason for that becomes clear when you start to assess what other GPUs are available on the market at this price point. Previously, I'd have used Nvidia's 60 tier GPUs in most of my $1,000 builds, but their latest 4060 is frankly overpriced, doesn't have enough video memory, and really underperforms. AMD's own option, the 7600, is a little bit, but not a great deal better, still lacks video memory, and really only confined to 1080p, while the 4060 Ti, which is Nvidia's sub $400 graphics card, is, well, it's pretty crap really, and you guys know my thoughts and feelings on this card quite well. The next best option would have been the Radeon 6750 XT, and a few months ago, this is what I would have recommended. It's got 12 gigs of video memory and provides great performance at 1440p. However, there are very few of them left around right now, and recent price drops to the 7700 XT make it actually a fantastic option. Not only is this a complete juggernaut at 1080p gaming, I mean really overkill for 1080p in most titles, but 1440p is really where it belongs. When it first launched, the reception wasn't great, and not because the performance was poor, but because it was too expensive. Now, this ASRock Challenger card fixes that problem. I've seen this as low as $389 US. I will of course leave latest pricing and availability links down in the description below. And when it comes to GPUs, ASRock have been on a bit of a roll recently on that value for money front. With 12GB of video memory and performance that knocks on the door of the 7800 XT, this card is a perfect fit for this build, and in my opinion, the best GPU right now for under $400. It also pairs up particularly well with this, the AMD Ryzen 5 7600. Again, when this CPU launched, a little bit too expensive, but prices have come down, and this is now, in my view, the best CPU for 1080p and entry-level 1440p gaming. You get 6 cores, 12 threads, and decent clock speeds. And while you could opt for the more expensive 7600X CPU, can't lie, that was a bit cringe, the only major advantage is the extra clock speed. You could overclock this if you want to 7600X speeds, but for this build where I think 1440p is going to be more of the gaming resolution, this is going to be fine. Ironically, 1440p needs a less powerful CPU in this build than 1080p due to the way that CPU and of course GPU bottlenecks work. This ASRock card, by the way, feels really quite nice. A little bit more on the basic side, some more exposed heatsink, but it's not too large, shouldn't run too loud, and has these two quite nice included fans. I'll be sticking with the stock cooler on the 7600. Again, that's going to save us cost. Getting a $400 GPU into a $1,000 build was, let me tell you, a bit of a challenge. So that's where cost savings like this come in. And as you'll see from the temperature data later, this shouldn't bottleneck the CPU. Now, there are some good options to choose from, including those from Johnsbro, Deepcool, and Peerless if you're looking for a cheap budget air cooler that will trim temperatures down a little bit and keep the noise of your system that bit lower. Now, Ryzen is a particularly good bet for this build because of motherboards like this, and this is the MSI Pro A620M-E. Now, when it comes to motherboards, it's about as cheap as you want to go. There are really not many boards cheaper than this I would recommend buying. However, for this build, it just does what we need it to do. Now, there are undoubtedly sacrifices that this board makes that more expensive options simply won't. A great example of that is you only get 2 RAM DIMM slots, there isn't any included Wi-Fi or even an included I/O shield. However, for raw performance, it's going to be fine. And this is a build where we're all about about optimizing the highest possible power CPU and highest possible power GPU we can fit. The first step when it comes to the motherboard is installing the CPU. Now, if you've not done this before, it's dead easy. Just find the little golden triangle in the corner of the processor and match this up with the triangle in the corner of the CPU socket. I'll circle both so you can see them nice and easily. Then push the arm down and lift the socket cover up. Here we go. Yes, nice and simple. Then it's an easy case of dropping the Ryzen chip into place, put the cover back down and add the arm in. Don't worry about the black plastic, that'll pop off of its, I was gonna say its own accord, but it feels slightly stuck today. There we go, and the CPU is easily installed. I am also gonna pop the stock cooler in at this stage. Now you'll see on the motherboard by default, you've got these two plastic brackets. Both of these need unscrewing, removing, and just, well, put them in the motherboard box in case you need them later. The stock cooler doesn't require them. Most coolers will have the thermal paste pre-applied. If yours doesn't, add a drop on now, and then drop the CPU cooler on top, a little something like so. 4 screws, 1 in each corner, just tighten those up bit by bit, and that'll get the CPU cooler nicely fitted. Fan header goes to the CPU fan header at the very top of the motherboard. Then it's time for the RAM or the memory. This is Team Group's T-Force Delta 32 gigs. I picked this for a few reasons. A, it's absolutely rapid, 6400 megahertz, but has a low CL rating of around 32. Now that's going to be low latency and high speed, which is perfect for the Ryzen CPU. That's the only disadvantage of this build really over a cheaper Intel chip, is that we've got to have more expensive DDR5 RAM. Now I personally think that's the right call, as it's better for in the future and means you're not going to have to splash out for loads of DDR5 memory if you ever want to upgrade this build or swap out things like the CPU or motherboard. 32 gigs is perfect for gaming and the RAM slots in very nice and easily, he says, while struggling to get the RAM in. There we go. The T-Force logo is going to be towards the top of the motherboard. Follow this rule and the RAM will go in without too many issues. Bit of pressure on both sides just to make sure the RAM is nicely seated into place. Storage is the final part of the motherboard assembly, and that is where the P3 Plus comes in. Now, if you've seen, I'm kind of worried, if you've seen my other videos, you'll think I'm paid off by Crucial or something. I'm not sponsored. The P3 Plus just remains one of the best value NVMe drives, full stop. You're going to get read and write speeds of about 5 gigabytes per second, so comparatively speaking, it's very quick, and it's a pretty affordable budget drive too. Now, it's going to go into the top M.2 slot here, but we seem to be missing an M.2 standoff, so I'm hoping inside the motherboard box there is a bag with what we need. Aha. Now in here is an M.2 screw and an M.2 standoff, so you can see both of those elements there. I'm going to pop the M.2 standoff into the end of this screw thread just here. It can be quite fiddly, so just be careful. Can be very fiddly. And once that's in, the M.2 drive can slide in with no problems. 45-degree angle, bit like an aeroplane, push it down, and then use the screw included to secure it into place. While I'm on the subject of the motherboard, I should grab this out the box. This is the integrated, no, not integrated, it's the non-integrated I/O shield. So commonly now, these things are just, well, not needed because the motherboards have them built in. With this being a pretty bargain basement motherboard, there obviously isn't this thing built in as standard. Taking a look at the case where the motherboard is next going to be installed, and this is where things get quite exciting. This is Phanteks G350A. No, G360A. I always find case naming schemes so confusing. Now, this is a really, really exciting chassis for a few reasons. You've got a tempered glass side panel here, which is pretty run-of-the-mill, and an integrated PSU shield that sort of forms the bottom of the fabric of the case. This is particularly common on budget chassis in particular. It's got nice quality of life features like a magnetic dust filter at the top for good airflow and keeping all that dust away, and things like the PCI lanes are properly screwed in. It's none of that cheap crap where you have to wiggle and snap it out, something I much prefer in the case of this Phanteks chassis. At the front, you'll also find a selection of 3 included RGB fans. I think they're addressable RGB as well, and you get an RGB controller integrated as standard. Now, this whole case set me back, I think, $85 at the time I bought this for the video, and I have to say the whole thing just feels nice and pretty premium. The main reason I bought it though was, well, A, the price, but B, you've got all this mesh at the front which looks really, really good and is going to ensure the best airflow possible for a build of this price point. Keeping loads of air to all of our components is going to make sure things stay cool, quiet, and perform at the levels that we expect. In order to install the motherboard, I do need to lay the case down flat. That's going to just make things generally a lot easier to work with. I mean that I'm not fighting gravity when it comes to installing the the board into the chassis. Inside of the case, you'll see a few things. We've got an area over here where the rear I/O shield needs to go, and you'll also see that we've got some integrated standoffs. These are configured by default for full-size ATX motherboards. This motherboard, though, is only micro ATX, meaning some of these standoffs need to move. Now, the standoffs at the top are A-OK and in the right places, as are the ones down the middle here. But I need to add one in here and also one in just here on the left-hand side of the chassis. Getting these standoffs in the right place is crucial to ensure the motherboard doesn't ground out and we don't have any major problems. In order to do this, I'm going to move one or two of the existing standoffs and also use this opportunity to click in the rear I/O shield as well, ready for that motherboard to go into place. This is obviously a more compact board in an ATX case, but I think once the rest of the components are in, and given the compact nature of the case, it shouldn't make, hopefully, too much of a difference. Once that's all sorted, it is time for the GPU. And by the looks of things, with this being totally box fresh, we have a peel. Ooh. And on the front, here we go. Oh, beautiful. I actually really like the look of this Challenger GPU. I want to say this is my first ever ASRock GPU, so this is quite a momentous occasion. Make sure to remove the PCI bracket off the GPU itself, and then remove the second and third PCI lane covers. Now, to do this, you should just be able to loosen these two thumb screws, move this sort of guardrail out of the way, and then more easily access the screws for the PCI lane covers themselves. As I say, it's the second and third lanes in this build, which are the two most common in most PC builds that I put together. You then need to push down this little retention clip on the PCI slot before lining the card up and slotting it into place. A bit of pressure on both sides. That's going to make sure the whole thing doesn't really go anywhere before adding back into place the two thumb screws to secure the GPU and basically get rid of the wobble. And all that remains then is everyone's favorite bit of the PC build, mine not included, cables, wiring, and the power supply. Now, this is Corsair CX650, and to be fair, it does everything we need. Now, there are some downsides to it. It's not modular, it's not 80 plus gold, it's not ATX3, doesn't have the new PCI Gen 5 power cable, isn't fanless, doesn't have a 0 RPM fan mode. However, it's cheap, and it's a genuinely very reliable power supply for a build like this. It's got enough wattage, it's got all the connections we need, the cables themselves look absolutely fine, you can see they're all black. The whole thing should be quite easy to cable manage, and with this build being a more, not entry-level system, but a system that does not require so much power, this is going to be absolutely perfect. Remember, money saved on the power supply in the right way means a better GPU, and that's why the 7700 XT is possible in this build. Now then, let's begin by taking a quick look around the cables so we know what we're working with later. You can see, first of all, here we've got our 24-pin motherboard power cable. We've also got a 4+4-pin CPU power cable, as well as our two 6+2 pins or dual 8-pin GPU power cables. I'm going to need both of these for the graphics card. Finally, there's also a collection of Molex and SATA power cables. These are for things like RGB hubs and old hard drives or SSDs too. The easiest way to install the power supply is just to spin the case around, slide the unit into the rear, a little something like so. I'm going to go for fan down to pull in air from under the case. Thankfully, we have nice included dust filters to make our life pretty easy in that regard, and then it's just 4 screws, one in each corner to secure the unit into place. Once that's into place, it's then a case of running the cables. The CPU is going to go up to the top left where the CPU is, the motherboard to the right hand side, and then the graphics card cable to, of course, the GPU. You'll also notice room for a SATA power cable at the rear. That's going to power the RGB and fans, so make sure you plug that in too. The front panel cables, and then all that remain, they're the fiddly connectors for these front ports. Very easy in this build actually. HD audio, which goes to the bottom left. We've got a USB 3 connector, which also goes to the bottom, but sort of more in the middle. And then our power button, which connects up to the JFP1 cables in the bottom right. This build doesn't have any reset or hard drive indicator LEDs, so just the one front panel cable to make things nice and simple this time around. And with a bit of luck, this thing should turn on. So let's see. Power button. Oh, easy. Oh my God. The graphics card has lights on. I had no idea. And look at the front fans. Oh, wow. Loads of different RGB modes, so we can jump through and have everything from like aggressive rainbow puke to like less aggressive rainbow puke. More rainbow puke. There you go. So you can have solid colours, or you can go all out on that RGB. RGB? Where's the RGB? I think I might need to spend some time figuring out how this controller actually works. But I have to say, this thing's looking pretty good. The true test of this build, though, is going to be performance. So give me a moment and I'll rejoin you for those all-important gaming benchmarks. Moving through into performance, and this is the bit that really matters at this crucial $1,000 budget. Now, to kick things off, I tested out Call of Duty's Warzone. I wanted to push things at 1440p, given how promising the 7700 XT is as a GPU. Here at high settings, with FSR enabled and set to the quality preset, that's given us a bit of a frame rate boost without overloading on the AI-powered upscaling. This build pulled in 188 FPS on average. That was really actually a lot higher than I perhaps expected, and showed how good this system is at potentially 1440p too. In Call of Duty's Modern Warfare 3, it was unsurprisingly very similar game to Warzone in terms of the mechanics of how it's designed. High FSR quality, 1440p, 207 FPS on average. Really great to see. Moving through into a harder to run title, and honestly, this is the point of the test that I was actually really pleasantly surprised. Starfield, which has struggled on lots of cards from both AMD and Nvidia at 1440p, did really well. 1440p high, I achieved 74 FPS on this build. Now, yes, it's not going to set the world on fire, and if this was a competitive FPS title, I'd be a bit disappointed, but it isn't. It's an RPG, and this level of frame rate and visual fidelity is perfectly acceptable. Same with Hogwarts Legacy, though we do break into the triple-digit frame rates here. 1440p high, FSR again enabled on quality. We test with FSR and DLSS on quality most of the time, and this pulled in 123 FPS on average. Fortnite at 1080p competitive once again stood up well, and it's amazing how much difference the 7700 XT makes over, say, a 7600 XT. Competitive settings pulled in 289 FPS on average for a genuinely competitive gaming experience. Wrapping things up with Apex Legends, and it remains one of the most popular games in our benchmark suite, 1440p high did not disappoint with 195 FPS on average. This is a build that really impressed me, and the 7700 XT is a card that's gone from being a poor value proposition to one of, if not the best value GPU on the market right now. What do you guys think of this build? All for $1,000. It does not get much better than this. Let me know in the comments down below. Links to everything will be in the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.